What's up, guys? Metal571 here, and today I'm going to be talking about the Shure SRH840. This is a closed-back dynamic studio monitoring headphone, but people buy it for personal use as well occasionally. I feel like this has come out of the limelight a bit recently. It used to be a lot more popular. I remember reading about it a couple of years ago as a more serious contender. They're still making it as far as I know, but it costs about $149. Let's jump right into the sound. The bass, it's got a mild mid-bass focus, something that's not that easy to pick up on, I feel like, unless you're comparing it with a lot of other headphones at the same time, which I always am. And it also sounded like maybe a little bit of a low mid. I can't tell if it's a low mid recession or the mid-bass is just slightly forward. It's not that far off at all, and I'm really picky, as you guys already know. So it didn't really bother me that much. But other than that, actually, extension is pretty good. If you look at Tiles graphs, you'll see they roll off a lot, but you got to look at the gray raws. And if you actually hear the headphone in person, you'll notice that it doesn't actually roll off very much. And on a sine sweep, I didn't hear a significant drop in level until you get to around 35 hertz, which is very, very good. I mean, for a closeback, I feel like it may be able to extend more. I don't know. The harmonic distortion is slightly higher on Tiles measurements than some other headphones, so you may not have as much power handling in the bass. I didn't test that by blasting it, which is weird because Cios has always said that I blast headphones, and maybe I do sometimes, but definitely didn't seem as severe as like the B&O H6 second gen, where that thing really runs out of additional bass it can provide and goes straight into harmonic distortion land pretty quickly. So it's not as bad as that. But with the bass anyway, the level for me was about 2 dB under what I prefer, so I gave it a good old Harman shelf at 100 hertz. For the mids, the upper mid range is a little bit forward, definitely forward on this thing. Maybe I think I only EQ'd it by 2.5 effectively, 3 dB or something like that, but it's somewhat aggressive. It's sort of balanced out by the treble, which I'll get to in a second here, but I think it might be slightly faster. I mean, the main contender is actually the headphone I'm wearing right now, which is an AKG K553 that I'm putting up against it, since they're both in a similar-ish price class, last I checked. Now, I think the mids still are a little bit more detailed, maybe, on the 840, because the 553 is a little grainy in the upper mid-range in my experience, and it's also a little bit forward. So correcting for frequency response differences by ear, I still think that the 840 has a slight edge, but it's very slight. It's minor. It's still not the best. It's not the cleanest. It's not liquidy smooth like an open back $4,000 planer or something. But it's not bad for the price, I think. But yeah, again, it's still a little bit forward, so I lowered it. But I didn't have any other issues other than what I talked about before with the low mids or the middle mids around 1K. Getting into the treble next, I think there's kind of like an upward tilt theme going on here, starting at the upper mids in this headphone. And so the treble is also aggressive, which kind of balances out the mids a little bit. But there's no sibilant peak at 6K or anything. That probably has some kind of valley like the 440 does, at least from what I'm hearing. So actually, the timbre of this headphone's very good, at least for me. I haven't had that many problems in terms of like where the peak locations are. It's pretty much on target. It's just overall, I think the treble and mids are a little bit hot for my taste, but for a studio use headphone, I think this is pretty darn close to a kind of like an HD 600 kind of a sound, but with more treble, I think, is what this is going at here. But and also more bass, of course, as it doesn't really roll off like the 600 does in the bass. So that's what I'm hearing here. But the most standout thing about the treble in this very good resolution. I was really surprised. I mean, I had the 440 for a long time before I finally sold it. And one of the main things you buy when you upgrade to this from the 440 in the lineup is definitely, clearly, the treble resolution. It's a lot less hazy and harsh and hashy. It's bright, it's forward. The air is also forward along with the mid-treble. But resolution is there. So that is good to see, good to hear. Apparently I can hear with my eyes now. The soundstage, however, is where this doesn't quite win. I don't know how many, I haven't seen that many 840 reviews over the years, but it was definitely obvious that it was not a small difference between this and the 553. This sounds kind of like, and I hate to say this, the M50X soundstage, and I was really not happy with the stage on this thing. Now, I mean, it does isolate better than the 553, which is one of the advantages, but, you know, it's too bad because, you know, it's got so many other things going for it. But when I compared my test recordings with imaging and tests with downstage width, it was so obvious going back and forth. And the K553 doesn't really even have the best soundstage in this price range. I think that's probably the DT770 winning out on that, but it's got some other frequency response issues that you may or may not want to deal with. So that's why this headphone does not have as good a soundstage as the 553, unfortunately. So with these sound reviews, I'm still going to talk a little bit about the previous categories, but a little bit more briefly, so that this is more of a get-to-the-point Metal 571 review. And I'm going to call this section Dealbreakers. So not worrying about build quality accessory specifics, what is it that you might not like about the headphone? I wouldn't even talk about it at all because you don't need to hear about it if I don't think anyone's going to run into a problem with this. But so as far as things like comfort, isolation, build quality, amp needs, genre pairing that's not really good or widespread as a useful headphone in some ways, then I'm going to mention any flaws here. And one of the big ones with this is, and I haven't personally experienced this, but these headbands are not the most reliable things in the world. I think some of these headphones tend to crack along these hinges. I've definitely seen them broken more than once, actually, in Sam Ash and Guitar Center, where sometimes you will find these around. They do crack. They can be destroyed. Doesn't bode well for a studio environment. I think this is a widespread Shure problem. Like the 940 is known to crack. The 440 can do it. And clearly this one too. So we'll be a little bit careful with these if you have a pair. You guys can tell me your experience with them if you own these. It may be okay, but I've seen more than a couple reports of these things cracking over time, which is not the most confidence-inspiring thing when you're paying $150 for a headphone right now. Now, comfort also wasn't great for some reason. These pads look deeper than they really are, and I'm not sure if this pair of pads is really worn out because this seems like an older pair. There's some leather ripping here and whatnot. So I hope when they're new, the pads have a little bit more depth to them. But it was weird because my ears were always touching the inside of these pads, and because of that, it got a little weird. It's a little odd. Like you could get itchy over time or something like that if your ears were always touching the foam on the inside. The foam is soft; it doesn't really hurt or anything, but if that's the way these are when they're new, then I'm iffy on recommending these for comfort. Like they have a good enough size pad, but it's just that they're not very deep. And yeah, one of the better things that's not actually a deal breaker is isolation. This kind of has a little bit of an advantage over the 553. Very, very good isolation, which is what you need for studio monitoring recording. So coming to my conclusions for this headphone, basically, perhaps this is a even more accurate reference sounding closed back with very good resolution for the price and the treble mid-range. And very little overall coloration, it seems like, too. Or timbre issues, very, very little of that, other than a slight up tilt going through the mids and into the highs. Comfort, not so great. Build quality, not so great. Soundstage, not really great. So that's kind of the pros and cons here. I'd still pick the 553 if you're looking for a very good closed back under $200, as long as it fits you, because it does have some issues with the pad sealing on some people, which I found out about, I think, after I did the K550 review so long ago. But mainly the soundstage is not even a comparison. Like it's so much better on the 553, and which is the same thing as a 550. The current one, if you're wondering, it's 553 Mark II in the US and a 550 Mark III are identical headphones elsewhere, is what I would pick over this. I think the 840 is very good as a monitoring headphone, perhaps, but if you want to use it as a general closed back, I feel like there are some issues with it that are going to stop you. So I hope that helps with the SRH840. Stay tuned for more reviews soon, and I'll see you around.